EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Hey everybody, welcome again to Call to Communion. This is the program for our non-Catholic brothers and sisters. If you've got a question about the Catholic faith and you yourself are not a Catholic, well, by golly, this is your show. Here's our phone number, 833-288-EWTN, 833-288-3986. If you prefer texting, that is fine with us. Text the letters EWTN to 55000. Wait for our brief response and then text us your first name and your question. Message and data rates may apply. Again, the phone number 833-288-EWTN. Michael Birchfield is our producer. Matt Kabinski is our phone screener. No, he's not. He's off today. I think Richard Jesse is the phone screener. Fantastic. Here it is. Written on my piece of paper. I should have noticed that. Rich Jesse is our phone screener today. Thank you, Rich, for jumping in while Matt has the day off. Also want to thank Jeff Burson on social media, who will pass along any questions that you may have via Facebook or YouTube. I'm Tom Price, along with proud Papa, Dr. David Anders.
I am a proud Papa, but
you are.
In what respect are you referring to my proud papahood?
Because today is the birthday of your brand new book. It is now available from EWTNRC.com. How the Catholic Church Saved My Marriage.
Actually, the publisher took out the word how.
Okay. The Catholic Church Saved My Marriage.
There you go.
So and today is the actual drop date, right?
Yeah, today you can if you order it, or you can find it at a bookstore, or if you go online and order it, they'll ship it to you today, or you can download the ebook immediately.
Fantastic. Now we're going to talk about the book a little bit later on in the hour, but I did want to give a little bit of a plug because I am very proud of you, my friend, because I know that writing a book is hard work.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Tom. And as I've said before, it wouldn't have gotten done without you and your help and friendship. So thank you very much for your contribution.
We appreciate that. Here is an email from Will. Will is a Baptist, and he writes, so when he says, apparently that's me or you, David, non-Catholic brothers and sisters, does this mean brothers and sisters in Christ? That we are all Christians, or what exactly does it mean when we're saying non-Catholic brothers and sisters?
Oh, thanks. Depends on the context.
Okay.
Depends on the context.
If it's the context of this show, it's probably meaning anybody who is not a Catholic.
Well,
right.
So the way the Catholic Church thinks about non-Catholics is it kind of in a series of concentric circles. So Church teaches that there are elements of truth and sanctification outside the Catholic Church, but in sort of dissipating waves of intensity, if you might. So there are those communities that are very close to the Catholic Church in doctrine and sacraments, like the churches of the East, for example, the Orthodox churches that where we overlap on maybe 95% of stuff. They're obviously closer to the heart of the Church than other religious communities.
Sure.
And look, the East and West were united in one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church for 1,000 years in Christian history, right? And after the Orthodox churches, the churches of the East, the various Protestant ecclesial communities came out of Latinate Western Catholicism in the 16th century, and they used the Catholic canon of the Bible, and their doctrines are often articulated in terms drawn from the Latin Catholic theological patrimony, and we have a lot of things in common with them. So they're very close to us, but not as close as the Orthodox. And then, I'd say after the Protestants, the Muslims and the Jews, at least nominally adhere to a similar concept of God. It's not identical, right? And share, the Jews share more with us, I think, in terms of the moral patrimony, the moral tradition of the Church, and then you can sort of spell it out from there. At least when we're talking about the baptized, all right. So whether Protestant, Orthodox, or otherwise, any baptized person shares with the Catholic a much more profound kind of unity, because through baptism we really are made members of the Church. Really do become members mystically of the body of Christ, and so there's an adoption to divine sonship that can take place through baptism that makes us brothers and sisters, not just in the sense of coming from the same human family, but even the adopted family of God.
Okay, very good. Appreciate your question there, Will. Thank you for checking us out. Here's one now from Steve watching us on Facebook. What real evidence points to the resurrection of Jesus?
So the empty tomb, the fact that they put his body in there and then it's gone, okay. The resurrection appearances, the fact that many witnesses claim to have seen Jesus alive after his burial, the fact of the origin of the Christian faith, okay. And I want you to think about that for just a second. So there wasn't such a thing as Christianity.
Yeah.
And of course, when Jesus gathered a body of disciples about him, none of those disciples were conscious that they were beginning a new religion called Christianity. They saw themselves as Jews and heirs to the Abrahamic promises, and expected those promises to be fulfilled in the ways in which Second Temple Jews had expected them to be, namely kicking out the Romans and rebuilding the temple and all that kind of good stuff. And all of them thought that the gig was up when Jesus died. All right, they were like, okay, well, we thought he was the Messiah. He wasn't. I guess we'll all go home and go back to fishing. That's literally what they did. Okay, and then lo and behold, a few years later, we find them running around the ancient world, proclaiming that Christ is the divine Messiah, who's given proof to all men of this fact by rising from the dead, and they're willing to lay down their lives in martyrdom in testimony of that fact. And so, a conception of the messianic promises and their fulfillment and the nature of our relationship to God emerges that's with continuity to Judaism, but some profound differences, some discontinuities too, that the apostles themselves had not anticipated. Where did that reality come from? All right,
Yeah.
and it's wholly unpersuasive to imagine that they just made it up, because A, these guys didn't think this way and then did. And B, they all were willing to die a death of martyrdom and lives of ignominy in order to testify to that. I mean, people will make up I think L. Ron Hubbard once said, if you really want to get rich, make up a new religion.
Wow.
And that worked, for a certain extent. I think he made some bucks. But apostles didn't make anything. They died impoverished and tortured and maimed and refused to recant their faith. This is not something that they were, spinning out of their own heads for their own material advancement. So empty tomb, and by the way, the tomb's still empty.
Yes, it is.
Right, nobody's there. Empty tomb, resurrection appearances. All right, and to as many 500 people who testified to having seen Jesus alive, and the fact of the origin of the Christian faith in contradistinction, in violation of the expectations of everybody at the time. There have been several books that have explored the historical evidences for the resurrection of Jesus. Probably the most extensive is the work by the Anglican biblical scholar N.T. Wright.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Steve, for your question there, and thanks for checking us out on Facebook. In a moment, we'll be talking with Jason in Clearwater, Florida, also Alex in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and we are waiting for your call right now, 833-288-EWTN, 833-288-3986. It's called to communion on this Thursday afternoon here on EWTN.
Sharing the fullness of the Catholic faith. 1-833-288-EWTN. 1-833-288-3986. This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
He was a mystic and reformer who died at the age of 33.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Catherine of Siena accomplished something no one thought possible. She convinced Pope Gregory XI to return to Rome after the popes had lived in France for almost the whole of the 14th century. They've been there ever since.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
60 on 10 with Monsignor Charles Pope.
The second commandment, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. The disclosure of a name in the ancient world belonged to the order of trust and intimacy. And so when God revealed his name to Moses, it was an extraordinary outreach to us, saying that we were called to an intimate, trusting relationship with him. And so we should always reverence this name as a great, great gift. We should obviously never use God's name to curse or to blaspheme or to berate others. That's wholly inappropriate. God's name is meant to bring blessing. And likewise, the vain use. Vain means empty. And so some of these expressions like, oh my God, or, and so on, need to be avoided as well. Vain means empty, and those are using God's name as an empty kind of expression of exasperation. And then finally, never ever to use God's name to swear an oath falsely. The second commandment, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? You are called to communion with Dr. David Anders. 1-833-288-EWTN. 1-833-288-3986.
Hey, welcome back to Call to Communion. Our phone number here, 833-288-EWTN. If you're not familiar with our wonderful daily program, Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, it is a lot of fun each and every day. Show's got quite a following at this point. If you don't have the opportunity to hear it on a Monday through Friday basis, you can always check it out on the weekends when we have the best of Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. You'll hear that Saturday afternoon at noontime Eastern, right here on EWTN Radio. If you're ready now, let's go to the phones at 833-288-EWTN. We begin with Jason in Clearwater, Florida. Hey there, Jason. What's on your mind today?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Anders. I understand that you are interested in hearing of the one thing that is stopping somebody from becoming a Catholic, and so I thought I would call in and tell you that my reason consists of one word, believe it or not, that stops me. And that one word is truly, Truly. All right, so you want to know what I mean by that, and I would refer you to the Catechism, number 1376. And before reading that one sentence, I'm keeping in mind the fact that Catholicism claims the gift of infallibility. And so in this paragraph, which you're about to read, the Catechism is summarizing the entire Catholic faith. As a matter of fact, it says the Council of Trent. So here they're quoting the infallible Council of Trent, who are going to summarize the Catholic faith in one sentence. And I'm telling you that it is one word in this sentence that stops me from becoming a Catholic. And so what do we read there? We read that Trent says, Christ our Redeemer said that it was truly his body that he was offering under the species of bread. Now, my response to that is that no Bible on earth has Jesus saying that the bread was truly his body. Now, as a matter of fact, I see three distinct errors in this one sentence alone. The fact Christ our Redeemer said is error number one. They're telling us something that he said when he didn't. And then they say that he said the bread was truly his body, which he didn't. And then they claim that he was offering something, which I would also dispute. But to keep it simple and to concentrate on this one word, the claim that Christ said that the bread was truly his body is categorically false.
Okay, thanks.
And
let me respond to that if I could, please. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So, first of all, with respect to the claim that Christ taught that the sacrament of the Eucharist is truly his flesh and blood, with an emphasis upon the word true, okay, I would point you to the Gospel of John, chapter 6, verse 55, in which Christ says that his flesh is true food and his blood is true drink. And the word true there in Greek is alethes, which that's what it sounds like. It's true and truly and true in every kind of variation that you could imagine. Now, the consensus of 2,000 years of Christian exegesis of John chapter 6, and not only the Catholic Church reading it this way, Lutherans read it this way, Orthodox read it this way, is that this is a Eucharistic passage, all right? And so that's, there you go, Jesus referring to the elements of the Eucharist as truly his body and blood. Now, with respect to the question of offering, the Greek in the words of institution do this, poiete, okay, have a sacrificial overtone in the Septuagint translation of the Old Testament that the New Testament draws on in using the language of the Eucharist. And I would expand that also to say, in the Lucan account, Christ says that this is the chalice of the new covenant in his blood, and clearly analogizing the Eucharist to the institution of the Old Covenant, which we read about in Exodus 24, when Moses slaughters an animal and sprinkles the blood on the people and says, this is the blood of the covenant. He's just sacrificed an animal, right? It's a sacrificial rite. And, of course, Jeremiah 31 that speaks about the institution of a new covenant written on the law, written not on tablets of stone, but on the mind and on the heart, all right? And, of course, St. Paul also analogizes the Eucharist to sacrifice. So that's, I'm going to have to beg to differ about whether or not Jesus uses the word truly in reference to his body and blood with the sacrament. He does, all right, and there you go, and also the sacrificial element is there. Now, I do think I should add that the suggestion that the way to read the Catechism is by way of direct quotation, I don't think that's in the mind of the Fathers of the Council of Trent. Now, whether or not Jesus said this, that's not the way they intend for their words to be read. And I think any sort of straightforward consideration of context would indicate that. They're communicating to you Catholic doctrine about the meaning of Christ. They're not quoting him directly word for word, clearly not in Aramaic, which he spoke. They're writing in Latin. Jesus didn't speak Latin, and I think it's artificial to insist that that's what the Fathers of the Council intended. Clearly, it's not.
Okay, very good. Hey, Jason, thank you so much for your call. We do appreciate your checking in with us. This is Call to Communion here on EWTN 833-288. EWTN is our number, 833-288-3986. Let's go to Alex now in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, listening on KMMK. Hey there, Alex. What's on your mind today?
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure can. Go right ahead.
So, I was raised Catholic. My question is about the creation story along with evolution. So, I was taught growing up that originally, I remember when I was young, that Adam and Eve was a very literal story. And then as I got older, I went to a Catholic high school. As I got older, I was kind of told that no, most of the Old Testament is metaphorical, and this is how we get proper real world teachings from the Old Testament. But then, as I've kind of become more scientifically educated and whatever else you want to call it, and you learn about evolution, you hear that from one generation to the next, as if. So we came from apes and everything like that, and it was okay to be Catholic and still believe in evolution and all this stuff. But I was wondering where along the line of evolution, of us coming from apes into humans, Homo sapiens, that the proverbial soul was inserted by God into Adam and Eve, as it were. Because that just doesn't make much sense to me, because as we know now, there is no first species of anything. It's evolution. It's a very gradual process. And that's something that always gives me pause.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I appreciate it. So first of all, with respect to the Catholic Church's interpretation of the first three chapters of Genesis and our relationship to scientific hypotheses, the idea that that the Bible should be read in a textured and layered way with a consideration of allegory and metaphor, of course, is a very, very ancient Christian doctrine that predates the scientific revolution and Darwinian biology by millennia. So, for instance, the Christian theologian, Catholic theologian Origen of Alexandria, who is a 3rd century character from Egypt, writes, "For who that has understanding will suppose that the first, second, and third day of the evening and morning existed without a sun or moon or stars, and that the first day, as it were, was also without a sky? And who is so foolish as to suppose that God, after the manner of a husbandman, planted a paradise in Eden towards the east, or placed a tree in it, visible and palpable, so that one tasting of the fruit by the bodily teeth could obtain life?" And he goes on and shows that, this, of course, he's not reading this document in a straightforwardly literalistic way. St. Augustine of Hippo, another church father of great renown, 4th century Latin, doctor of the church, says the same thing in many places. Book 13 of his Confessions, for instance, he gives a completely allegorical interpretation of the book of Genesis, and he later writes an entire book about it called On the Literal Meaning of Genesis, in which he concludes it ain't literal. Okay, so it's a long history of the Catholic Church reading the Scriptures in this way, and quite frankly, the New Testament itself sets us up for this kind of interpretive paradigm. When you look at the way St. Paul interacts with the Old Testament, he sees allegories abounding in the Old Testament and uses that method to interpret the sacred text. So that's been part and parcel of the Catholic theological method for a long time. In terms of the question of the specific historical moment in which God may have infused the human soul, obviously the sacred text doesn't specify, in the fossil record, so to speak, when the first humans received the infusion of the immortal soul. As a curiosity, and I just propose this as a curiosity, consideration of human anthropology shows us I think what some anthropologists call a cognitive explosion. We see evidence of, if you might call them pre-Adamite, pre-humans, but very similar biologically to the humans that we know today, that seem to lack any ability in language or record keeping and conceptual thought. And then all of a sudden, kaboom, out of nowhere, you see this explosion of cognitive activity and evidences of tool making and sign language and things of that sort. So that's kind of interesting aside. Obviously, the work of coordinating the data of revelation with what science can reveal us is an ongoing process and open to a lot of speculation, and there's room in the tradition for differences of opinion about this. You might be interested in an article on science, monogenesis, and the Christian faith by, I think his name is Kenneth Kemp, and I know that article is archived at Notre Dame University Archives, which gives at least one theologian's speculative thoughts about how that might have taken place, and he addresses the concerns you raised about the nature of evolution, and that you don't just have spontaneous emergence of some radically distinct pair within a population of origin. He deals with those kinds of questions. Another place you might want to look is the website Thomistic, Thomistic, thomisticevolution.org. One of the authors there is a Dominican theologian and biologist by the name of Nicanor Austriaco, who has dealt extensively with just this question that you're asking. Okay. And then finally, in terms of what the Church itself teaches on this issue, you might look at the encyclical Humani Generis by Pope Pius XII. All right. So I'm not going to tell you, the day, the hour, and the place where God dumped a human soul on the first human couple. Okay. That's it's not necessary for me to get into that. I will. I've pointed you for 3 different accounts, ways of understanding that that take into account what modern science reveals about the origin of the human species.
Sounds good. Alex, thank you so much for your call. That opens up a line for you right now, 833-288-EWTN, 833-288-3986. In a moment here, we're going to be hearing from Chris in Peoria, Illinois. I want to throw out a text that you can think about, cogitate perhaps over the break. This is from Ash, who says, "Why do you think God permits Protestant denominations to flourish? it really makes it a hard case of converting the comfortable when I have conversations with my Protestant friends. So if you want to think about that on the break, that'd be great. Or if you want to tackle it right now, we can do that too.
Well, sure. We got about, 30 seconds?
30 seconds.
I get started. Well, so obviously I don't know the mind of God, and I don't know why God does anything. The Catholic Church believes that there are elements of truth and sanctification in Protestantism, and that if they flourish because of the truths that they contain. Okay, I have a lot of thoughts about the sociology and bureaucratic structure of Protestantism in the Western world, how it's organized, where its place in demographically, and I know specific instances of why things flourish. That I don't have to reach into the mind of God to figure out.
Okay.
We can talk about that or not, as the case may be.
Sounds like a plan. Back in just a moment with lots more Call to Communion here on EWTN. Do stay with us.
What's your blue flame? You know, that activity you love to do and that seems to give you more oomph in your life? On Register Radio this week, author Jennifer Fulwiler shares her blue flame as she discusses her new book, One Beautiful Dream.
And Archbishop Joseph Naumann of Kansas City encourages us to reclaim our culture, one mind, one heart, one soul at a time. Join me, Matthew Bunson, and my co-host, Jeanette DeMello, for Register Radio every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern and Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Hi, I'm Doug Keck, and this is an EWTN bookmark brief. I'm speaking here with Obiang Uju Ikocha, author of Target Africa, Ideological Neocolonialism in the 21st Century, and it's published by our friends at Ignatius Press. Uju, tell us, what is this book about, and why is it of interest for Catholics?
It is about the Western countries, Western entities, Western foundations even coming to African countries, and they are coming, for something that looks good. They're coming to give aid, they're coming with help, coming with gifts, but then when you look closer, you see that there are gifts with strings attached. There are issues like abortion, contraception, population control, what happens with the youth and human sexuality, human sexual identity, all these things that are being talked about now, which is threatening now to erode our own cultural views and values.
The author is Obiang Uju Ikocha, and look for the book at EWTN's religious catalog, EWTNRC.com. Thanks for stopping by.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
And I wanted to tell you guys how great your show is, because I listened to you guys for every day for the past 5.5 months. It's because of you guys that I came to the Catholic faith. Now I'm going to church on Sunday for the first time, because I just got out yesterday from jail. And I got my mom to go too, and my girlfriend is also going with me. Wow. She's willing to give the Catholic faith a try.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Hi, this is Cy Kellett. Later today on Catholic Answers Live, 2 hours of open forum. First hour with Jimmy Aiken, and second hour, Patrick Madrid. Catholic Answers Live, 6 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio. Now back to Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders.
What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? You are called to communion with Dr. David Anders. 1-833-288-EWTN. 1-833-288-3986.
Tomorrow, Friday, we will be airing a mailbag program. David is not available tomorrow. Is that correct? You're not available? So we're going to air a mailbag tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds good.
I've got a job to do for my bishop.
I understand. Well, that's awfully important stuff there. So we're going to have a mailbag for you tomorrow at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern. I bring all that up because that means this will be our last live show of the week. So if you've got that question that you're nagging on a little bit, give us a call, 833-288-EWTN. We'll try to snag it in here during the rest of the hour. Let's go now to Chris in Peoria, Illinois, listening on St. Bernadette Radio. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing? First, I just want to say, I really get a lot of insight from you guys' program. I drive my part-time job. I drive a lot, so I like to listen. I am a believer. I have some friends and things from the Catholic faith. Anyways, I do have a question. My question is, I guess, what in Christ's life, with ancient, like, I mean, I don't want to say like I'm a paganist or anything like that, but like with constellations and things like that, and like the kind of like the zodiac of like the seasons and then different times and eras we're in. I guess right now they say we're in Pisces, which when Christ was born, like the three wise men, some say that it was the constellations in Orion and things like that. That you know, it's kind of like suggesting the certain change of the like, you know, the one, like, I guess the zodiac in a sense. But what I was gonna say was, like, from all the different like Christ figures, I guess, like throughout like ancient times, like I guess the story's been told probably like 4 or 5 times with different kinds of names and stuff like that. What I mean, like, for the most part, like what is it, I guess, that's different from Christ in the sense, because I know he claimed himself as God, but it seemed like the story has been told thousands of years before and stuff like that.
Yeah,
about
I'm with you,
virgin
Chris. I understand. Thank you very much. So essentially, if there are elements of the Christian story and the life of Christ that we find echoed in other religious traditions, some that may even have predated Christianity, what significance does that have for our understanding of Christian faith or the uniqueness of Jesus? Okay, well, first of all, let me say the insistence upon radical uniqueness, I think, is misconceived. I mean, I know when I was a Protestant, it was very important for me. This is before I became Catholic. It was very important for me to be able to say that my religion is utterly unique, because I for all kinds of reasons, for theological commitments. And so if somebody pointed to commonalities between another tradition and mine, it made me very uncomfortable, okay? As a Catholic, I have the complete opposite point of view. When someone points to commonalities between Christianity and other religious traditions, I go, yep, that's exactly what the Catholic Church says should happen, okay? Why? Well, because the Catholic Church teaches, first of all, that we share a common humanity, that the human race has a common story, that we come forth from one Father, and also we share a common nature. Human nature is the same wherever you go throughout the world, and that means that we have similar biology, we have similar psychology, we have the same immortal spirit that longs for union with the transcendent God. So most people, in most cultures at most times, and this remains to be the case today, express their moral longings, aspirations, and intuitions in the form of narratives or stories. Okay, that's common human experience. In fact, even today, the other day I was talking to one of the producers in EWTN television about new TV properties, and the discussion turned to how you communicate this. Well, you do it through a story. You know, we're drawn to stories. It's how we understand ourselves. So if, say, for example, one of the things inbred in our psychology is the desire for renewal and redemption, an ability to slough off what's dead or dying or destructive, and to recreate myself on a new mode, right, that's more life-giving, more transcendent. If that's something that's endemic to the human experience and embedded in the human psyche, well, wouldn't you expect that the myths and stories of cultures around the world would reflect that longing, that aspiration?
Sure.
Right? Yeah, of course you would.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you would. So that's not, and to me, it's interesting to look at elements of Christian faith and practice that may have been directly influenced by pre-Christian antecedents. It's equally interesting for me to find what might seem like elements of the Christian story in cultures in which there was absolutely no interchange at all between historic Christianity or Judaism and those other cultures, because that really points to the universality of the story being told by the Christian faith. Now, so is there anything that makes Christianity different? Well, yeah, there are several things that make Christianity different. So one of them is that in these other myths and stories of other cultures, we're usually talking about something that takes place in mythic time, all right, or in some celestial heaven, some realm that's remote from time and space and actual human history.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but Jesus Christ is a real historical person that walked on planet Earth, all right, at an identifiable, locatable place in history. I mean, when Quirinius was governor of Syria, we read about in the book of Luke when he's going to lay out the timeline for it. And he tells you, Pilate's governor of Judea and Herod's the king of Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. These are historical people. We'll read about them in other documents. And And so we're not talking about a mythic death and resurrection of some Babylonian fertility god. We're talking about the death and resurrection of an actual historical human being whose tomb we know, and by the way, it's still empty, Tom, last time they checked.
I was there last year.
Right,
It was
exactly.
empty.
So the resurrection, is it a symbol? You betcha it's a symbol. It's more than a symbol. It's a symbol in that it is an actual historical event that really took place that also has profound significance for the rest of humanity and how we live our lives, okay? So Christ demonstrated his divine authority by the way he lived, the way he died, and the way he rose again, all right? And then the actual impact of that down through the centuries. So, you know, the death, resurrection, and ascension and preaching of the name of Jesus is the fulfillment of actual historical prophecies from the Hebrew Scriptures that, I mean, we got them. There they are. They're in our hands.
Yeah.
They predate Jesus, okay? So Isaiah says, for instance, that, and not just Isaiah, but the whole Old Testament, that God's going to raise up a descendant of King David, a Judean. Through him, he's going to establish a new kingdom that won't be like the old kingdom, and he's going to establish a new covenant that won't be like the old covenant. He's going to pour out his Spirit, and all of the nations are going to gather and hear the word of the Lord that comes forth from Jerusalem. Well, that happened. I mean, you don't have to be a believer to recognize that this happened, that the whole world now acknowledges, to some extent, the God of Israel as God with a capital G.
Yeah.
All right, even people who are atheists, when they reject, say, I don't believe in God, which God are they rejecting? Well, by and large, they're rejecting the Christian God, right? There's identification. And every part of the world is covered by a Catholic diocese. And those very same scriptures of the Hebrews are read and proclaimed in pulpits across the world all over the place. So that's a fulfilled prophecy. And you say, well, what about the fruit in the actual Christian society, the church, the kingdom of God present here in mystery? Well, I mean, look at the incredible change, the way in which the Christian faith operated as a kind of leaven in society to radically transform the human race. Radically transform the human race. So what do we take for granted in the modern world? Some of the great developments that have lifted the human race out of its misery that we had in ancient times. Well, scientific revolution, the advent of modern technology and industry, the regime of human rights and health care. All of these things are gifts of the Catholic Church to the human race.
That's true.
You know, I mean, the first people to actually articulate a comprehensive theory of universal human rights were Catholic theologians, drawing on the principles of human dignity and freedom embedded in the Christian religion. Right? Scientific revolution is the fruit of Catholic intellectual efforts. All right. Of course, the regime of public benevolence, again, the gift and fruit of the Catholic Church. Now, there have been many books on these topics. Some you might consider Tom Wood's book, How the Catholic Church Built Western Civilization.
Great book, great
Father
book.
Stanley Yaki and all of his great contributions to the Catholic contribution to the origins of the scientific revolution. I recently listened to a lecture from the Thomistic Institute on Francisco de Vitoria, the progenitor of the modern doctrine of universal human rights. UN Declaration on Human Rights, written by Jacques Maritain, a Catholic philosopher. So has the Church had real purchase, if you will, across human culture and transforming the state of humanity? Recently, the atheist and strident anti-religionist Steven Pinker, who's one of the leading intellectuals in the world, really, no fan of organized religion at all, wrote a book. I can't remember the title. I think it may be called Enlightenment or Enlightenment Now. Something. It's a bid for progress in technology and his view of how the world has been transformed so much for the good. And I appreciate people coming out of poverty and so forth through social work and expansion of commerce and industry, all these things that he celebrates. What he fails to recognize, perhaps to the extent that I would appreciate, is how much all of these developments, even the Enlightenment itself, which so many secular thinkers are kind of big on, they don't even recognize how even the Enlightenment is a kind of offshoot of Christian spiritual ethos. I mean, the idea that we could advance the human community and the dignity of the human person through reason and a consideration of our common humanity, and then build a rational case for morality. I mean, these are really core aspirations of the Enlightenment. These are all Christian convictions.
Yes, indeed.
Right? Now, the Enlightenment thinkers wanted to shear those away from their dogmatic Christian content, which is why somebody like Nietzsche, who's an atheist and a nihilist, believed that morality had no foundation, because he was reading Kant and Hume and Hobbes and Diderot and these characters, and said their arguments fail because they themselves have neglected the Christian origin of their claims. And so he thought, well, I'll just go off into nihilism.
Mm-hmm.
But the better conclusion is, yeah, they were right to seek a rational basis for morality. They were wrong to try to do that without reference to the Christianity that made sense of those claims.
Chris, thank you so much for your call. We do appreciate it. This is called Communion here on EWTN. I want to take a moment here to talk, very happily a moment, to talk about this brand new book that I'm pointing to for those of you watching us online from EWTN Publishing, The Catholic Church Saved My Marriage, Discovering Hidden Grace in the Sacrament of Matrimony by Dr. David Anders. It offers a hope-filled alternative for those who live moral and spiritual lives in union with Christ and His Church. David, I think I'm in chapter 5 at this point in my late-night reading.
Oh, neat.
And it's all about marriage.
It is all about marriage, and some people have given me a funny look and said, Andrews, apologist, what are you doing writing about marriage? And the truth of the matter is, there are a lot of books on apologetics. There are fewer that I'm aware of that show why these doctrines that we talk about on the radio all the time, why they matter.
Yeah.
Why they matter. This is a book about why Catholic faith, doctrine, and practice matters, because it makes a real difference in human lives, especially in the most intimate relationships we have, namely our marriages.
It is available as of today. Today is the birth date of this book. It's now available from EWTNRC.com, EWTNRC.com. You put in your order today online, they will ship it out ASAP, I promise. This is called a Communion here on EWTN. Let's go to Jerry now in Novi, Michigan, listening on Ave Maria Radio. Hey, Jerry, what's on your mind today?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So, Dr. Anders, I have a quick premise slash assumption, then a question, and then an example. My premise or assumption is that the rational soul that we have is the form of our body. That's, to my knowledge, correct, and what the Church teaches. My question is, what is the body? And, is the body such that it doesn't matter what physical material makes it up, as long as it allows the operations of the soul, of our rational soul, to work properly? So, for example, the way that I was thinking about it in my head was, people can do an organ transplant, and if it's accepted, it doesn't mess with who that person is, their human nature. And then you might be able to, as technology grows, go up to higher level things. Like, what if you could transplant a brain into a different body? Would that be, considered, would the person's soul be the form of that body? And then what if you have technology that could allow, a synthetic material that could perform the essential biological functions of every single cell and every single neuron in the body, and you did so in a, sequential manner so that, their brain never stopped working, if you will. So, how does that work with regards to soul being the form of the body?
Yeah, these are wonderful, extremely philosophical and very speculative questions that I will touch on, okay? But I'm going to suggest also, I think you are someone who would benefit enormously from the musings of the philosopher Edward Fazer, who's written a number of books. Several of them are available at the EWTN Religious Catalog, but he also has a blog that delves into, in fact, among other things, this exact question that you raise. And I've read a number of his blog posts with some remarkable philosophical sophistication and careful nuance, addresses just this question of the continuity of the human person, the relationship of body and soul to that question of continuity, and so forth. And I'm a church historian first, and only an armchair philosopher. So I would delegate to people who have more expertise in that field for these really complex philosophical speculations. But basically, when we think about the soul being the form of the body, keep in mind that it's the form of something, right? And it's the form of matter. So when we think about the relationship of soul to body, and you know this already, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, we have to get away from this idea that the soul is a substance and the body is a substance, and somehow or another the soul gets squeezed into the body like, water inside a jar or something, or a mold inside of a medium that it then shapes. That's not the nature of the relationship. All right. Form in Catholic theology or in Aristotelian philosophy really means the principle of the intelligibility of a thing. All right, and that's more expansive than just shape. Okay, now for geometric shapes, form and shape are identical. All right, but for more complex realities and more transcendent realities, the relationship is more sophisticated than just shape. All right, there's more to. I mean, if I grabbed Tom Price over here and I stuck him on the rack and I twisted him out of shape, all right, he wouldn't cease to be a human being. He would still have the form, i.e., he would still be intelligible and identifiable as a person, just one that happened to be misshapen. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right, whereas if I twist a triangle out of shape, it stops being a triangle. Okay, and so when we think about questions of personal identity and continuity across time, likewise, we have to think about more than just the succession of mental states. All right. So in the utterly, science fiction and fantastical world, in which, and this of course is wholly impossible, it's just science fiction, in which I could actually take a stream of memories or of consciousness and cause a line of continuity to exist, in another discrete location, in another packet of flesh and soul, I would not have a case of the continuity of a human person. I would just have a succession of memories in a timeline of a narrative or story, and something like that gets addressed in the famous Ridley Scott film Blade Runner that they just remade, because you have android called replicants that are created with embedded memories of things that never happened. Okay, and so it raises all these kinds of personal identity questions. Interesting take. I have not seen the new one. I can't endorse or otherwise. All right. So more than continuity is involved. Plus, if I suddenly had a cessation of my memory, if I lost my memory, if I got dementia, if I had no memories, so I had no consciousness of personal continuity, that wouldn't destroy my continuity. So the continuity that establishes a human person as a person can encompass, but not necessarily, personal memories, all right, but it also must be the continuity of that body-soul unity that we call the human person. That's why in the doctrine of the resurrection, right, one of the things medieval theologians used to deal with, they didn't know as much about cellular regeneration as we do, but they understood that there was such a thing as cellular regeneration. So the parts that I have today may not be identical in terms of, down to the level of the molecules as the parts that I had 10 years ago. And then what about the case of somebody who's burned in fire, or what if you have a cannibal and he takes part of his substances created out of some of the flesh of some other cannibal that he's eaten? I mean, all those questions actually got dealt with in scholastic theology. And how they got answered depends on this, that, or the other. But but the basic idea is the continuity, even in the resurrection, is the continuity of a person, body, and soul as a single entity. Okay. Not a soul suddenly informing a completely new package of matter. So that's just some things for you to think about. And again, for more detailed analysis, I really would suggest you take a peek at Dr. Fazer's blog.
Sounds good. Jerry, thank you so much for your call. This is Call to Communion here on EWTN. We will get to as many calls as we can in our program. If you are on hold and we can't get to you today, be not afraid. Call us back on Monday. We will put you at the head of the line. Here now is Jill in Bradley Beach, New Jersey, listening on Domestic Church Media. Hey, Jill, what's on your mind today?
Hi, guys. Love the show, Tom. Love
Thank
the show,
you.
Dr. Andrews. You're always. I want to be like a spiritual sponge, just soaking everything in. I'll make my question really quick. Recently, I heard on one of the shows, not your show, but one of the people had called in, and they had asked as far as the King James Version of the Bible, when the Protestant scholars were translating it into English, they really didn't want the honors because I guess the difficulty of it. And since the Catholic scholars were more knowledgeable, they basically asked if they would do the honors. And from what I understood, they said no. And my question is there truth behind that? And if there is, could you just expound on it a little bit?
It actually was on this show.
We did get into that. So the King James Bible was a product of the Anglican Church. It was commissioned by King James I. It was entrusted to Protestant scholars. They revised the Geneva Bible, the so-called Great Bible, which was a predecessor English translation that had been commissioned under Henry. and had been carried out, I think, by Coverdale. He had, in turn, drawn a little bit on earlier translations of the Bible, and some of Coverdale's translations actually depended on the Latin Vulgate, which was Catholic, and but most of it was from the Greek and the Hebrew. And so there's a complex interaction of the history of English translation of the Bible that goes into the prehistory of the King James. But I am not aware that any of the translators commissioned by King James for his authorized version consulted with Catholic scholars who then refused their appeals. I certainly don't know of that. I mean, I'm not a detailed expert in the whole history of the King James Bible. But it's certainly, I mean, look, the Protestant church in the 16th century, 17th century had competent, able scholars at their disposal. I mean, you don't have to be a Catholic to read biblical Greek and Hebrew at all. And in fact, King James himself, he did want Protestant scholars on the job because he had some specific theological criteria he wanted to make sure got inserted into the text. And one of them is he wanted the translation to take place in a way that would preserve the English hierarchy.
Yeah.
Where questions of translation came up, they were going to err on the side of Episcopalianism and royalty. So I wouldn't put any stock in that idea.
Okay, Jill, thank you for your call. Angelo in Wiley in Detroit, Michigan. You've been holding a little bit longer. Wiley is listening on Ave Maria Radio. And what's on your mind today, Wiley?
Hi there. I had a question. Oh, by the way, great show. I love recommending Ed Caesar. His work is amazing. Love what you guys do.
Thank you.
My question was about the earlier discussion about Adam and Eve. And the gentleman was asking, in light of, let's say, the theory of evolution, Adam and Eve, how does the church respond to this evolving knowledge? So my question was kind of a response to that discussion. Is it a requirement by church teaching dogmatically as a practicing Catholic that we must believe that there was an Adam and an Eve? And I mean, really, there were two first people, Adam and Eve, and they, mated and had the next generation of humans and so on.
Okay.
All right. The answer to your question depends on how you interpret paragraph 37 of the encyclical Humani Generis by Pope Pius XII. There are those who read paragraph 37 of that encyclical in such a way that we must absolutely affirm the doctrine of monogenesis, namely that the entire human race takes its origin biologically from a single human couple that we might call Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
All right. There are Catholic theologians who are seeking to be faithful to the magisterium. I mean, they're not conscious dissenters from the church by any stretch of the imagination, who read chapter 37 as saying something slightly different, namely that polygenism would only be an allowable opinion if it could be reconciled with the doctrine of original sin. For more on that dispute, I would point you to the website Thomistic Evolution, where such questions are dealt with a little bit more thoroughly.
Very good. Wiley, thank you so much for your call. Hey, Dr. David Anders, thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Tom.
Hope you enjoy your weekend, and you've got big things coming up, I believe, right?
Well, hopefully writing, and then I have a son coming home from overseas.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. For Angelo in Pueblo and Dennis in Dayton, please call us back next week. We will put you on at the head of the line, I promise. Remember that we do the program each and every Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, encoring at 11 p.m. Eastern with a best of show on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern. On behalf of Michael, Rich, and Jeff, I'm Tom Price. Have a great weekend. See you next week on Call to Communion. God bless.